All right, let's talk about a monster, and I don't mean the fictional kind. We are diving deep into Winter Storm Fern, a megastorm that literally paralyzed an entire nation. So how did one single weather system manage to bring a huge chunk of the US to a grinding halt? Let's get into it.
You know things are serious when the National Weather Service puts out a message like this. Take this storm seriously, folks. Yeah, that's not your average, hey, you might want to grab a jacket warning. This was the first real signal that something big, something really severe was coming for everyone.
So why the serious tone? Well, look at this number, 2,300 miles. That's how long the line of weather alerts was at its peak. I mean, to put that into perspective for you, that's basically the distance from New Mexico all the way to Maine. A single, unbroken chain of warnings. This wasn't a regional storm, this was a coast-to-coast monster.
Okay, Section 1, a monster storm arrives. So what exactly made this storm a monster? Well, Winter Storm Fern wasn't just dropping a little snow. No way. This was a complex, dangerous system that brought a nasty triple threat. We're talking heavy snow, sleet, and freezing rain, hitting state after state after state.
And the scale of this thing was just historic. We're talking about a storm that affected close to half of the entire U.S. population. I mean, think about that. At one point, nearly 1 in 2 Americans was under some kind of weather alert. That's actually the most simultaneous weather alerts we've ever seen recorded for one single storm.
All right, Section 2, aviation grinds to a halt. Now, when a storm this massive rolls in, it tends to hit our most complicated systems first and hardest. And the first domino to fall? Oh yeah, it was the nation's entire air travel system, which basically shut down almost completely. Just look at this number, nearly 15,000. That's how many flights were canceled during the worst of the storm, 15,000. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was one of the worst disruptions American aviation has seen in years. Millions of people were just stuck.
And here's the thing. The storm was smart, in a way. It didn't just hit random airports. It hammered the country's most important hubs. I mean, look at this. Washington, D.C.'s main airport, DCA, almost 97% of departures canceled. Basically a ghost town. LaGuardia in New York, over 80%. And then you have massive hubs like Dallas-Fort Worth and Charlotte, both seeing over 75% of their flights canceled. When that happens, it causes this huge domino effect. It doesn't matter if it's sunny in San Diego. If the plane was supposed to come from Dallas, you're not going anywhere.
And of course, the big airlines felt the most pain. American Airlines, with that huge hub in Dallas we just talked about, got hit the absolute hardest. They had to cancel over 1,400 flights in just one day. Delta and Southwest weren't far behind, with about 1,000 each. It really just goes to show you how fragile that whole hub-and-spoke system is. You take out 1 or 2 key airports, and the chaos just spreads everywhere.
So let's really put this in perspective for a second. That Sunday, January 25th, it wasn't just a bad travel day. It was the single worst day for flight cancellations in the US since the whole system shut down during the pandemic in 2020. I mean, the industry just hadn't seen chaos like this in years. All right, next up, Section 3, a nation on alert. Because, grounded planes were really only half the story. The storm's impact on the ground was just as bad, and it was quickly turning into a full-blown national crisis.
So what happens when you get a ton of ice? Well, ice is incredibly heavy, and as it built up on power lines and tree branches, it pushed the power grids, especially in places not used to that kind of weather, right to the breaking point. Over 160,000 homes and businesses, mostly in Louisiana and Texas, lost power, and that's absolutely dangerous when it's freezing cold outside.
Of course, the official response had to be swift. Governors all over the country started declaring states of emergency. This is a really big deal, by the way. It's what allows them to free up money and bring in resources like the National Guard to help out. But even that wasn't enough for a storm this big.
Yeah, the crisis escalated all the way to the top. The president had to approve federal emergency declarations for a whopping 12 different states. We're talking South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, the list goes on. This is what unlocks the big federal help from agencies like FEMA. And looking at this list, man, it just drives home how massive the footprint of this storm really was.
Okay, Section 4, navigating the travel chaos. So all this big picture national level chaos, well, it becomes a very personal crisis when you are the one stuck at the airport, right? So let's talk about you. If you find yourself in that situation, what can you actually do? Turns out you have rights, and knowing what they are is absolutely key.
So, the big question. Your flight is canceled. Now what? What are your options?
And believe me, the answer isn't always what the airline wants you to think it is. You actually have a lot more power in this situation than you probably realize.
Okay, this is probably the most important thing to get. You need to understand the difference between an airline waiver and your right to a refund. A waiver is just an offer. The airline is saying, hey, we'll let you rebook for a later date without a change fee. But a refund, that's your legal right. If the airline cancels the flight and you decide you just don't want to travel anymore, they owe you your money back. In cash, not some voucher that expires in a year.
And it's not just about cancellations either. Your right to a refund also kicks in if there's what the Department of Transportation calls a significant change. And this isn't some vague term the airline gets to define. No, it's a specific set of government rules, and if the airline breaks them, you're entitled to a refund if you choose not to fly.
So, listen up, because this is important. You are entitled to an automatic cash refund if 1. Your flight gets canceled and you don't want the new one they offer. 2. Your domestic flight is delayed by 3 hours or more. 3. Your international flight is delayed by 6 hours or more. Or if they change your departure or arrival airport, or even just add more connections to your trip. If any of those things happen and you decide to scrap the trip, you get your money back. Period. Those are your rights.
And finally, our last section, the storm's lasting impact. Because here's the thing, even after the storm moves on and the skies clear up, the chaos doesn't just vanish. A storm like Fern leaves a mark, and the system feels it for a while. It's what we call the ripple effect. You got to think of the whole national aviation system as this incredibly complex, finely tuned machine. When a storm like Fern comes through, it's like throwing a giant wrench into the gears. Suddenly, thousands of planes and tens of thousands of pilots and flight attendants are all in the wrong cities. And trying to get all those pieces back where they belong, that's a logistical nightmare that can take days to sort out, leading to even more delays and cancellations long after the sun is out.
And that really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? We called Winter Storm Fern historic, but the reality is storms like this seem to be happening more and more often. So it really makes you wonder, as these historic storms become more common, just how strong is the infrastructure we all depend on every single day? How resilient are our travel networks and our power grids, really?